Welcome to our lecture series for the Human-Centered Design Bootcamp. In this video, we will be focusing on the plan phase. The plan phase is about understanding how to bring your solution to life in the real world. We are now approaching the final stages of our innovation process. So now that you have tested your prototype and received feedback from your stakeholder, it is time to begin to think about what implementing your solution might look like. The planning process that takes place in this phase is meant to help you to think in a more strategic way about what resources you might need to implement your solution. This process will also contribute to helping your team prepare to pitch potential funders and partners in order to get them excited about getting involved in the project. Your goal has always been to have big impact, and now it's important to sit down with your team and map out what do you need to consider and plan in order to get there. Think about what do you need to make it real. And before you start the implementation, we must plan how to implement. This means creating roadmaps, identifying resources, deliverables, and milestones. In the planning phase, we keep converging. This means aligning and defining our strategy for implementation by narrowing down our options. The goal of this phase is to get your design team aligned around what next steps would be required to implement your concept. At the end of this phase, all team members should be clear on what needs to happen next. As we get ready for our solution to live in the real world, it is very important to ensure that the solutions that are going to be implemented not only are desirable and feasible, but also that they can be sustained over the long term. Make sure you don't lose sight of the big picture, and although you want to see your project get off the ground, you should always keep your eyes on the big picture by ensuring that you are thinking about how the project will sustain itself in the long run. In order to plan your way ahead, there are some critical areas for the project success that you should be looking at. For each of those areas, we outlined several questions for you and your team to discuss and reflect. So let's talk about team and capabilities. Whereas a multidisciplinary team is great during the design process for arriving at unexpected ideas and novel solutions, in the implementation phase, you'll be looking for specialized know-how, technical capacity, and local partners. Consider the needs of your project and evaluate if now it's the time for some team members to roll off your project and for others to roll on. Take a look at your existing team. How are you going to staff the project? What people or skills do you need to make your solution happen? Who would be the most essential members of the implementation team? How should the team be organized? Which critical skills will be required? And are there any specific skills that you are missing in your team? Or is there a need for consultancies or outsourcing to fill the skills gap? Moving into budgets and funding strategy. A budget and a funding strategy will give you the resources you need to get your solution out into the world. Get some colleagues from the finance and partnerships team together with your design team and brainstorm the best ways to get your project off the ground. How much your intervention will cost? What do you need money for? Consider elements like travel, staff, equipment, developing materials, and others. Are you able to get revenue from the users themselves? And where will the money come from? It is also important to build partnerships. As you move through the implementation phase, you may realize that you'll need to rely on a variety of partners. The key idea here is identifying the kinds of partners you'll need and start to build relationships with them. Are there organizations that you now need to partner with? Are they development agencies, civil society organizations, or private companies? Why? What added value they will bring? How will you manage those partnerships? What roles and responsibilities each party will have? Make a roadmap or a timeline. Road mapping is a chance to gather the key stakeholders in your project and collectively figure out the timeline, determine who is responsible for each element of the project, and establish key milestones. Sometimes it's helpful to print out a big calendar for the next year and use it to map out what needs to happen when, such as key dates for the pilot launch or other important milestones. What needs to happen in the next month, in 3 months, in a year? Think about the major milestones in your project timeline. When will you launch? When will you need to complete your technical development by? When will you kick off a communications plan? Get key dates on the calendar and assign a team member or partner to each track of work and get someone to champion each element of your project. Be prepared to hold them accountable to the tasks. Communications. A communication strategy is a critical piece bridging the design process and the implementation of a program. You should reflect on questions such as who should you be pitching to? Who do you need to convince? How will you share your story? Is it a presentation, a video, a website, an article? Who do you need to involve in supporting you? How do you plan to capture stories from the people you are designing for and the impact you are having? Monitoring and evaluation. As we all know, project monitoring is the process of keeping a close eye on the entire project management lifecycle and ensuring project activities are on the right track. Also, a lack of goals and measurable objectives is the primary reason why projects sometimes fail. So during the planning stage, you should consider the following questions. Determine why you need to measure. Is it to demonstrate impact or to get more funding? How do you plan to measure and evaluate your results? Who will help you in this effort? What quantitative and qualitative indicators do you want to track and monitor? What decisions can be made with those indicators? Now that we looked at some of the questions that we should be asking ourselves, let's look at some tools and methods we will be using during the plan phase. The tools in the plan phase are designed to help your team begin to think about how you might work to implement your solution if you were to receive funding. At this phase of the design challenge, you are moving from an idea you are developing to a concept you are working to implement. A concept is a robust idea that has been developed through multiple rounds of prototyping and testing. There are two tools that we will be exploring in this video: refine your idea and project planning strategy. As usual, you can refer to the guidebook for more depth and guidance. You can find instructions, very detailed ones on each tool. You'll find a case study, facilitation tips, and reflection tools and rubrics to help you and your team self-assess your progress. So let's move into the first tool, refine your idea. Prototyping an idea is radically different than implementing a concept. Transitioning to implementation can sometimes be difficult for teams. Refine Your Idea is a tool designed to help your team Begin to think about your prototype as a concept you are implementing. You can use this framework to help your team make the transition to making your idea a reality. Now that you have expanded on your big idea, take some time to refine it into a concept. Summarize the idea in a sentence. State the objective of the concept. What are the goals you hope to achieve? Then develop the concept further and synthesize what you generated when you were expanding on your initial idea. And finally, brainstorm indicators that will demonstrate if the idea is working. Let's see an example of how to fill in this tool. This tool is organized into 5 different boxes. The first one is the concept title. And as usual, we will be looking at the example from the playbook idea that you can also find in your guidebook. So our concept title is Adventures in Learning from Home. The concept headline, describe your idea in a sentence or two. So here's our headline, Stories from Families About How to Learn Best at Home. These help build confidence and act as a guide. Concept description. Is your concept a series of small interventions, a larger programmatic idea, or a broader cultural shift? Our concept is stories about families and their lived experience and expertise in learning how to learn during a pandemic. This will start as a series of small interventions and turn into a broader cultural shift. It will include short animated videos and comics, practical advice and tips from stories, a platform for sharing and getting feedback, and a choose your own adventure pathway. Objectives. What changes do you hope your concept will achieve? What is being changed or created? We want to help kids build skills around understanding how they learn best. Help families feel confident that their children's learning is on track for their learning goals. Offer new ideas for when the things you have been doing aren't working super well, and creating a community of grassroots support for families learning at home. How might behaviors look different if the goals are achieved? Well, we hope behaviors will look very different. We hope that families will be more organized and supportive. Students will be more focused and confident. Patterns of learning may change. Students will begin managing learning on their own. Partners of coaching, teaching, and mentoring may change. How might emotions look different if the goals are achieved? Well, we believe that families will be less frustrated. There will be less conflict about learning in the home. Parents and caregivers will be less stressed. Children will be less stressed and more confident, and less anxiety and stress for families to manage learning from home. Let's move into the final box, indicators. How will you know if your concept is working? How will we know if it was successful? Well, we will try to ensure the following. Families will sign up and engage with the stories and platform. Families will engage with each other on the platform. Early adopters will emerge and become learning coaches. Families will report that their children are having success learning from home, and families will actually do the tips and tricks suggested. And what will we measure? We'll measure learning outcomes, grades or goals, frustration levels through a survey, confidence levels through a survey. We'll measure the amount of time students spend focused on their studies. We will also use stories and comments shared on the platform. Next is the project planning strategy tool. We know that transitioning from open-ended design work to implementing an idea requires a significant shift in how the team is working. You can use this specific tool to support that shift. The project planning strategy tool is designed to help your team transition from an exploratory design mode to implementation mode and map out the next steps required to implement your solution. You can use this worksheet to determine the details of your project and begin to draft a plan for implementing your solution. So let's look at one particular example in how to use this tool. The first box asks us, this is what the project is. What interventions will need to be implemented? Well, we are planning to create a platform and create a user base for the platform. Who will be responsible for leading this project? Well, our project lead is Katie. How will this concept be implemented and or disseminated? Leveraging partnerships with NGOs and governments, partnering with community groups and ensuring that it works in a small group before scaling, and using social media to spread the word. How much will it cost? Well, we outlined here the estimated cost for the website, for the project lead, for content creators, and other budget elements. What other resources are needed? Partnerships, collaboration tools, and families to feature in the beginning. When will it launch? Well, we expect to hire a team and start developing in 3 months, and then launch full platform in the subsequent 3 months, and then scale platform for the next 6 months to 1 year. Moving to the second part of this tool, this is how the project will be implemented. So what needs to stop happening? Well, one of the biggest bottlenecks is time of Katie. So we need to free up Katie so she can lead the project. What needs to start happening? Again, free up Katie so she can lead the project. And Katie should hire a core team support, hire content generators, hire a filmmaker, and hire app developers. Which stakeholders need to participate? At this point in time, we are considering NGO and government, communities, families who are sharing, the education community, teachers, and school advisory boards. Who needs to be convinced that this idea is good? Well, first and foremost, families, but also the government, the education community, and to a certain extent, our own team. What plans need to be made before this is launched? We need to do some project planning, we need to do some hiring, content creation, and platform planning. So here we are, approaching a very critical stage of this project, the pilot or implementation part of the project. During a pilot, you will fully execute on your idea, finding out if it truly works the way you envision by running it with all the staff, space, and resources necessary. You'll learn if your idea really is desirable, viable, and feasible, and what it might look like to do it at scale. Good luck with your planning. Thank you, and see you in the final lecture, Storytelling.